Hello, everyone, and welcome to Transforming Today Show. I'm your host, Rebecca Weintraub, and I'm an intuition coach, and I help people discover, develop, and strengthen their intuition. And today I have with me Alissa Taglione. How are you, Alissa?
Hello, I'm so good. How are you?
That's awesome. I'm doing well today too. It's been kind of a crazy morning, and now it's calming down a little bit. I think that was the same for you, right?
Exactly, like it's rest period.
So let's just enjoy our time
Right.
together because we're here now. Um,
Mhm.
so, Alissa, first, just tell our viewers what type of coaching that you do. What does your business look like every day?
So I'm a transformational life coach. I do a lot of content, so I do a lot of articles and I do videos and I do a podcast. Also, I have a podcast called The Bloom Method. And my coaching is really about I feel like there's this epidemic of, someone put it really nicely recently, self-dislike. I have to remember who said that. And it permeates society, especially in women, and just kind of working with people to really recognize that there's so much to love and that we can really bloom out of this dark place and we can really like be who we were always supposed to be without all of this self-judgment and perfectionism and and just holding on to our past and really starting to let go, make some room, set some goals, and like grow some beautiful stuff in our lives. So kind of
Mm,
what I do.
I love that. And do you happen to be a visual person?
I am an extremely visual person. Yes.
Okay, so while you were saying that, I just thought of like the lotus flower that basically what I've been told is it grows out of the mud or it grows out of like sort of typically ugly conditions, if you will, but it's just like the most gorgeous flower. And I don't know, like when I say that, what comes up for you and when you're thinking about your program?
Well, I mean, that's such a perfect example because I think there's always a stage of rebirth, sometimes multiple times in our lives. And like the phoenix coming out of the ashes, the lotus coming out of the mud, I think that sometimes when we get in really bad places or we get in really dark, low, ugly places, per se, like that is an opportunity to really bloom forward, to really grow forward, to really open ourselves and our authentic being and just really release our soul self-expression. um, I'm in the school of thought that we are on this earth to just express all parts of ourselves. And I think that culture and living in the earth, so like living in an earth plane, like we need to have our needs met, and we need to do all these things. We have physical requirements. And I think sometimes accessing resources and physical requirements, like being in groups and like interacting with people, sometimes those can really affect how we treat ourselves because of how we're seeing ourselves mirrored in other people. And some of that comes from childhood and what we're told that we are, and some of that comes from just the media, whatever. But we're fed a lot of false information about ourselves, and there's a lot of negativity around us all the time. So whenever we're able to create a space where we can really be held in that we are human and imperfect and that's okay, and really be given space to grow and be understood and to heal and to move forward. I think that's where true healing comes from, because it's just kind of like taking things out. And that's why I love like the garden metaphor, because it truly is like getting like the dead parts off of us that no longer serve us, like getting the weeds out, things that are not helpful in our relationships or outside of those, and just giving ourselves room to grow and be and just allow ourselves to love ourselves, you know? So yeah, I'm with you on the lotus for sure.
Yeah, and the way you're talking about this, like, there are things that I've talked about in my lifetime because I've experienced them and I've learned some kind of lesson or I've taken, a takeaway of wisdom that I can share with someone else. And the way that you're talking now just makes me believe that you're not just preaching this. This is something that you believe wholeheartedly.
Right.
And should I assume or not assume that it's because you went through some kind of process to arrive at these ideas?
Yeah. So, I mean, to go into my personal story, like I believe your medicine is your message, essentially, right? So I experienced a catastrophic car accident about 5, 6 years ago. And then I had 3 children preceding that in the next 2 years. So I was into the work. Like, I don't know if that's like preparation or what that is. Um, I choose to see it as a gift now, but it was definitely not something I'd like to go through again. But overcoming post-traumatic stress, learning to raise children so quickly, overcoming anger and bitterness and resentment for what had happened, like really releasing my old self, because the self that experienced that car accident didn't exist anymore. So really reconnecting with my true authentic being outside of this person that I had been prior, and really trying to decide going forward the person I wanted to be was a huge step also. So it was an alchemical transformation for me, and it was uncomfortable 90% of the time. And there's still so much work going on, but I was always looking for teachers, and those teachers were always coming in whenever I needed them. I remember like watching Wayne Dyer for the first time and listening to Abraham Hicks for the first time, and having these crazy interactions that like would never happen, just because I was open to the healing. I was open to learning and open to finding out like how to really live my soul's true expression. And I wanted to be able to help others kind of cross through those bridges when you're going through a hard time and you're taking back yourself and you're looking to be who you want to be next, and just be a space for those people to find and grow in. So
So when you were talking about releasing sort of that old Alissa, or that previous Alissa, and now you're stepping into who you want to be, how you want to show up in the world,
right.
how you want to engage, what position, like, I'm almost wondering, like, I think it's the movie The Ghost of Girlfriend's Past, or Christmas Carol, where you kind of have like that, they show you the observer view, right? Like the scene is happening, but a person or persons are kind of on the side, like watching it, like an observer. And when you were saying that, it almost made me feel like there was some of that present, maybe, but I don't want to assume. I want to ask you, what was that? What did that look like as one part of you was shedding off or releasing, and you were stepping into that other part of you?
So there is a book that I absolutely love called Women Who Run with the Wolves, and I read it like every 5 years because it applies every 5 years. It's like a new different part of your womanhood, and like you just, yeah, it's just amazing. But there's 2 stories in there that I really love, and one is letting the dead things die and letting those go. And that was a big part of it, like attachment to superficial judgment, attachment to like being self-deprecating humor, just like isolating is a big one for me. And so that's something I still have to work on, because I just tend to like want to just be in my brain all the time. And then the other one was untangling the bones and kind of like giving myself space outside of the experience. Like, so I had 3 children in 2 years. So I had twins, and my twins were born at 29 weeks. They were very early, which was very upsetting and stressful. And in that time, I didn't really have the energy or the space to really acknowledge or emotionally process what was happening at the time. And that was something I kind of just had to keep my head down and keep going through. And untangling the bones is kind of just like a process of looking back at some catastrophic, crazy stuff that's happened in your life, and like allowing it to be okay, and like allowing yourself to kind of pick through and like put everything together. And like, I'm a real big believer in rewriting narratives. I'm a real big believer in checking your narrative of your life, because that's so self-personifying. Like, I went through this and this and this, and this means this about me. And with the whole process of kind of looking back, like the accident, everything else, like kind of other things that have happened, and really allowing myself the space to let them grow, like I can really pull those lessons out. I can really see who I was at the time. And so when I see other people suffering with similar things, it's easy to recognize, because it's like, okay, I know the energy of what that is. I kind of know what the process might be. They obviously know more than I do. Like, right? Like, I'm always going to listen to hear what they have to say to me and how they are feeling and everything else. But having that personal experience with grief, hardship, trauma, PTSD, like it really opens up space for me to observe others.
So in your practice, your clients are getting a co-leader of sorts, right? You're in this with them, but you are, because you're not just empathetic, but because you are able to be empathetic in almost like a detached involvement kind of way, right? Where you're
Yeah.
not stepping into their box. In some ways, you're leading aspects of it, and then you're letting the client lead aspects because they have their own answers, right? But as the coach, we're helping draw out those answers and we're helping them move forward. When you went through this, did you have one single person that was a coach that helped you, or was it various sort of resources that you pulled from to help you through that transition?
So I actually had several coaches during this time. And I also went through a transformational leadership experience in Columbus, Ohio, and that really helped too because it was really like intensive at the same time. One of my number one people though that has helped me through, and I don't know her personally, but I like to pretend to, is Brooke Castillo's work. The life coach school work is so concise and science-based and clear, and it really puts an importance on managing our minds and how we interpret things and taking responsibility for how we feel, so that when we're feeling like torn apart by what's going on, we can recognize that it's not like, yes, these things are going on, and yes, it's always justified to feel how you feel, but like, you get to determine how you feel. You know what I mean? Instead of giving our power away to situations or people, or letting other people determine how we want to show up in this moment, how we want to appear in front of others, how the environment that we create around ourselves, we get to really be in charge of that. And when I started doing that work and I started looking at negative self-talk and I started looking at things that were really, really harming my sense of well-being, that changed the game because that puts you behind the wheel again. So, I mean, her work really, really, really helped me not only steer a way forward, but a way to keep steering. You know what I mean? Like a way to keep going when things are hard, because you have to allow your feelings, you have to process them and move them through. And you have to be able to look at these things from different views so that you don't go nuts. Like, you know what I mean? So that you get to stay in a position of power and move towards your goals and create the life that you want to create. And so I have gotten the most out of her work, out of anything.
So I'm curious about that because, I've like in the past, I've had like, negative self-talk, or I've thought that I couldn't do something, right? And in both of those situations, the negative self-talk, I just think I heard enough people saying, don't do that. When like one day I woke up and I stopped doing it. For thinking I couldn't do something, there were certain things that I needed to not prove to myself, but I needed an opportunity to do things I had never done before and sort of test that my confidence level and test my ability to finally get to the point where I feel like I'm capable of anything. Like maybe not being a brain surgeon just because I'm not really interested in it. And that's, for me, like remembering all the terminology and where everything connects would be pretty hard for me, maybe, or I don't want to spend my energy on it, but you know what I mean? Like I'm like anything I want to put my mind to, anything that I want to focus on, anything that interests me, like I know I can do it and I'm going to do it. And so when it comes to things that you really want to do, but you have that, I call it an entertainer. So like I have something in my head that says like when I want to do this, I have this little entertainer in my head that says, "Oh, don't do that. Come over here. Like we'll have fun. Just come with me. Like we're going to do whatever together." And I'm wondering, I'm not sure if that goes away, and there's a lot of theories on how to kind of treat that. You can say it's a protector and you need it to give it another job, and it's really there because it's helping you, not hurting you. So I've heard all these theories, and I'm wondering, like, what you've gathered so far. Like I was saying, there's a difference between self-talk, and then there's a difference between that sort of what I call entertainer in your head trying to derail you or whatever. What theories do you have, or what experience do you have, kind of, if you relate to that?
No, I'm with you. I'm like ready to go. So like that is your brain. That's how your brain works. So your brain is wired to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and what is the third one? Seek pleasure, avoid pain, and I don't remember the other one. But the most important thing is that it wants to seek pleasure. So the easiest thing to do is to do the fun thing, right? Because that your brain's going to get that dopamine hit. It's going to go like, yes, that's what I want. However, it's going to cause problems because you're not going to do what you actually want to do. And so when our brain wants to avoid pain and you want to do something new and you're scared out of your mind, it's going to go, well, let's not do the scary thing. Let's go have a cocktail with Bev down the street. Like it's not like that's what your brain is set up to do. So the third part of that, I just remembered, is the easiest way. So it wants to work in the most efficient way. So the most efficient way is to go through old neural pathways of behavior. So doing the same thing that you've always been doing. So that's why it's really hard to have long-term changes in adult behavior, because we've really, really, really reinforced these neural pathways of things that we would rather be doing. And so like when you're on a diet and you're like, screw it, I need cake. Like if you've been doing the same thing all of us do, like that's how our brains are wired. So knowing that your brain is always going to do that, you've just got to deal with, you've got to deal with the discomfort. And like, that's the biggest thing too, is that I think with coaching and with wellness and with kind of our fun, like woo-woo world of like all of it, it's great, but there is discomfort. There's always discomfort. Like 50% of life is uncomfortable. And if it wasn't, then we wouldn't have the contrast of what's good and what's bad. Mm-hmm. So without it being uncomfortable, we don't get those like high, crazy pleasure, I did it, blow your own mind situations, right? So knowing that it's uncomfortable, going ahead, even though you know it's uncomfortable, like, and doing it anyway, and you get it done, your brain also freaks out on achievement. So if you get it done, like you're going to get that same dopamine hit, if not better, than if you would have gone and had a cocktail with Beth. So
I love that, because I had never heard it in terms like that. And now that I'm kind of thinking of it, it's like, yeah, when we say no, it's just like, yes, 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 and right. It feels great. And like, for me, I talk about this all the time on this show. Like I never understood celebrating. Like not until like a couple years ago did I understand like why it's so important to celebrate yourself. Yeah. And so I love that. And so okay, let's say you do it once and you say no to the cake once, and you feel good about that. What's the best way to make that a pattern, rewire those synapses, create a new routine? How does that work?
Right. So, the first time that you do that, you're going to get that dopamine hit that's going to motivate your behavior going forward. And as you continue to make that choice, it's going to continue to reinforce that neural pathway of this is not something that I want for myself right now. And there's nothing inherently wrong with cake. But if you have goals that you don't want to eat sugar like that anymore, and you don't want to like screw your brain up in the middle of the day because you're trying to work, that's totally fair. And like, you can just say no. And it's so funny because I was getting to a point, I do a keto diet kind of thing, and gluten really messes me up. So I've been trying to say no to it, and I do fall back and go forward. But I've been noticing as I've been working on this and trying to implicate and change my brain chemistry to not want it anymore, that every time I look at it and say no, it gets easier, because you're really reinforcing that and like just expecting the discomfort. Because one other thing that the teachings that Brooke Castillo has done that's really, really helped is that when you're reinforcing behavior and it gets easier and everything else, I'm kind of losing my place here, sorry. But when you're reinforcing behavior, the desire for it is going to go away. Like the chemical attachment goes away too. So it's really, really cool to watch your brain like do science stuff. But the other point I was going to make that just came back to me is that there is also additional suffering in not expecting to suffer. So if you're expecting that things should be easy, like changing your diet, overhauling these literal chemical addictions in your body, and that includes like anger and rage and depression too. Like you can create chemical addictions in your body to those feelings and those behaviors, and those can ultimately become your personality. So expecting for those things to be easy and then being upset that they're not is like creating additional suffering, when if you just recognize that it's going to be uncomfortable and you're kind of mentally prepared for that and you can just sit in it, really reduces the suffering as well. So
Yeah, I talk to my clients a lot about the concept that pain is in the resistance.
I love
And
that.
it's not really, that kind of came to me when I was in this spiritual group. And they taught me that for me, like sugar is biologically like not like I get addicted to sugar. And this happens for many people too, but it's like extreme for me. And so when they taught me to remove the sugar, it's like I started learning about like where, like it wasn't that when I said no to the cake, like thinking about saying no is so painful to me. Like, how could I not? Like, what happens if I don't have the cake? You know what I mean? It's just like, it seems like tragic to me if I don't have it. I've like already decided that I'm going to have it. And so to like stop all that and just say, no, I'm not going to have it. Like on the other side of that, not having the cake, it's actually not that bad. It's really the resistance to like, how could I, how dramatic I can be. How could I not have it? And I started realizing that with anything in life, yeah, there's hard work involved, but usually that hard work is pretty much rewarding as you're doing it and then after you're doing it. And so it's really just and it's not just procrastination. It's just, it's even just the thought and the emotional attachment we have to the thoughts,
Yeah.
and I don't know if that resonates with you, but that's been something that has really helped me make those harder decisions to get over that wall of resistance.
Right. So, I mean, actually that is the entire, like the meat of what I do is the thought-based coaching, is recognizing the thought patterns, recognizing the beliefs behind the thought patterns, and how that determines everything as far as I'm concerned. Like the way you see the world is based on your thoughts. Like we see everything through a filter, and that's through our thoughts and our core beliefs and our thinking systems. And I think whenever we want to make change long term, whenever we want to do anything, like it all comes down to your thinking and your mental wellness, and how like your brain is it thinking in a way that's helpful to you, or is it thinking in a way that's really detrimental? And I mean, when we don't have control over our thinking and our brain, it becomes chaotic because I have personally felt like, so this is a very personal story, but had a misdiagnosis of bipolar disorder in college, and which is later, I don't have it, but believing the thought that I no longer controlled my emotional self, body, or anything else, I threw in the towel. I just did whatever I wanted because I believed that I didn't have control anyway. And that's such a powerful belief. And that changed like all of my like total change in personality. And it was based on an idea, a thought, a belief that had been given to me that was false. And so it's so interesting. Like you look at studies and they'll say like, you're going to have the same reaction to the idea of something as you would the reality of it happening. So like if I were to tell you that you won $1 million in the lottery and you believed me, you'd freak out whether you won it or not. Mm-hmm. So when you're having negative self-thinking and you're saying like, I'm not who I want to be, like I'm behind, like all of my peers are doing really well, like I was supposed to be at a different spot, like the shoulds, and you believe that, you're going to have the same results. Above is below, right? Like it's going to be the same. So starting to believe new things is really critical also. So starting to believe and get out of those thought patterns that have been now wired into us, that we're not good enough, we're not who we're supposed to be, we're not living up to who we thought we were going to be, and then turning it into, I'm a work in progress, I'm heading in a new direction, this is who I am, this is who I want to be. Shifting that goes with all of that chemical change in your body, with emotions and rewiring synapses and I'm not sure if that was the right terminology, but rewiring your brain to like work in that way, then everything changes. I love the Wayne Dyer quote, like, once how do you say it? Okay, so when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. It's something similar to that. And it's so true. It's so true. Because once you start loving yourself, the world isn't as scary of a place, because you're starting to see love more, because you're creating more love for yourself. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think that thoughts and managing your thinking is everything.
I agree. And I just love the word perspective. And I just love, like, that's a common theme in my life because when we can shift perspective,
Right.
Everything changes, even just like the slightest little shift. Right. And so I like that you're talking about this mental dimension, because for me in my intuitive coaching, like, I believe that intuition is a balance of our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual dimensions. And a lot of people think that it's just that sort of gut feeling or something like that. For me, what I've experienced and what I teach others is that there's a balance. But in order to find the mental clarity, and this is why it's so cool that, a lot of us do a very similar thing with our clients. We, because of who we are and what we've experienced, approach it from sort of a different, unique angle, because we're all unique coaches. And so for me, when you're talking about kind of like shedding one thing to embrace something else, maybe negative to positive, I do a lot of resentment work with my clients. And I literally take inventory with them, and I help them go through their entire life. We sort of go into a meditative state, and I just document for them as it's like pouring out of them, names, institutions, we do like a high level. And then I have a process where I literally process every single one of those resentments with them. And it opens up this space for something new. And if they can set an intention, if it's, that they want to bring more spirituality in, if they want to become more emotionally intellectual, or if they want to create space for transforming their body, let's say, or taking on something new, a new hobby or a new interest, right, whatever it might be, we deliberately like fill that space or hold that space, whatever it might be, but acknowledge that we've kind of moved all that negativity out. We've shifted perspective. We've literally unrooted that resentment that has been holding them in that one perspective for so long. Yeah. And now they can kind of see this 360 view, and it all lightens up. And it creates that space. So I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit about any of the techniques that you have to create space with your clients?
Oh, I love that you talked about resentment. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. That's so cool. So a lot of what I do with my clients is listen. I just listen and kind of hear like where it starts to be painful. I wouldn't describe myself as an intuitive, but I'm really sensitive to other people's energy. Like I feel it, like I can feel it when people walk by sometimes, like if they're feeling upset. And it took me forever to like separate like what is mine and what is yours. So that really helps when we're having conversations about things like resentment and things like just pain, like separation pain and stuff like that. So really listening for those painful places and then kind of going in. I like to keep my work future focused as possible, but I definitely feel like if there's thought patterns that are really bumping up, so like against somebody's success and against what's coming, what they're looking to create, then that's somewhere we go. But it's a conversation. I mean, the whole process really is a conversation. It's about holding space. It's about non-judgment. It's about listening. And I really believe in people's inherent power to understand themselves. I just don't think that in this place and time and culture that we really have a place to talk like that. Mm-hmm. So being able to create and hold room for clients, I use a lot of techniques like the wheel of life to identify where some of these things are coming from. We do a lot of rewriting our narratives. That's a big one too. And I have a freebie that I'm going to post in the next couple of days for that. But the Bloom method is a program that really starts and ends in a particular way. There's modules that are being built right now. Right now it's a one-on-one coaching program, but it's going to be a group coaching program come October. And it really starts with like, let's look at where our life is now. Like, start where you are. Like, what is happening? Let's take notes. And kind of looking at where they are now and where they want to be and what's in the gap. Mm-hmm. And then creating those possibilities in our mind of what's possible once we start setting these goals, and can we think bigger. And I think that's a big thing too, is like recognizing that possibility is infinite, and that I feel like we're all kind of put in these boxes when we're born, and in our neighborhoods and our communities and cultures and genders and whatnot. Like, there's so many labels and boxes, and just knowing that there's infinite possibility for you to be anything. I think that really helps clients too, is just getting out of that framework, like you said you do with the resentment. Mm-hmm. And then when we're doing our goal work and how we're going to track goals and get to those things, really working on the mental aspect of like what's coming up when you decide that you want to be 145 pounds and you've been 206 pounds your whole life. Mm-hmm. Like, what does that bring up for you? What does that draw out of your body? What emotions are coming with that, and what part of your body are they coming from? Mm-hmm. I believe the chakra system really gives us a lot of insight as to where some of this pain resides. So recognizing where those emotions and feelings are physically present in our lives. So yeah, that's kind of, it's kind of the process.
You know, it's funny, I've said this before on this show, but I wish that I had all the money in the world. And I do a lot of different things with it. I give it maybe to different people or organizations. I'd have to think through that. But for the selfish self-care part of it, I wish that I could go to every single coach that I've met so far and buy at least one package with each coach, because you know, and viewers, this is the power of coaching. This is why this is so amazing. It's like, you know, I'm working with I have like 4 coaches right now, but I'm working with a health coach right now. And she has the methods that she has. And I was attracted to her program because I felt like it was going to address, and it will address, a lot of different things that I need help with. But then here I'm talking to you and I'm like, oh gosh, wouldn't that be amazing to do some deeper work here and there? Like, I am personal growth. Like, I've always been like this, but it just energizes me because, you know, when we work with our clients and when they're really invested and they want to make the change and they want to do the hard work, like, coaching really works. Like, it really, really, really works. And it helps transform. And it helps you become the person that, I don't know, you are meant to be, or you aspire to be or want to be. And I'm wondering, when you're working with your clients and they're going from, I don't believe in point A and point B because we're always going, I'll put it in terms of that. When they're going from sort of this place of where they have the negative self-talk, maybe they've been that 206 pounds, you know, maybe they don't love their work situation or their personal life isn't where it wants to be. When you start working with them and they start kind of like coming out of that and going into this new life, what is it like to support them when they really start kind of shifting out of one into the other?
I mean, well, first of all, I have so much reverence as a coach to even bear witness to something so personal and so beautiful. Like, I just think that watching people grow and change and really shed these chains that don't necessarily belong to them and like really just allow themselves to be, I think that is what keeps me going as a coach every single day is just having reverence for that space, because it's straight up holy. I don't know another word to describe it, but I mean, it's so much witnessing, and it's so much observation, and it's just so much continued support, especially in the mental part, because as we come out of the cave, that's when shit gets crazy, right? Oh, sorry, I broke the rule. I broke the swearing rule. But I mean, that's when your stuff gets crazy in your brain, because you're leaving this old self. You're kind of going through that caterpillar butterfly situation, and it's like a lot of the old comforts want to pull you back in. So I think as my clients start to really come out of that space and really start to bloom into who they want to be, that's when the work is the most critical, is because that's when everything comes up. So I mean, being open to the work is just the beginning, and the real work resides in that space between. And I love that you said there's no point in A and point B, because healing isn't linear. I don't know if you've ever seen that graphic. I love it so much. But yeah, I think the real work comes when those floods of emotions that we've been shutting down, however we've been shutting down, really start to show up, and we have to deal with that, and we have to mentally allow it and let it process and just be with it. And so I think that's the most critical part, is really being able to be there for when the old yucky stuff comes up and sort it out and keep going forward.
Let's actually go a little bit deeper when you were talking about bearing witness, because that is what made me want to be a coach. Like, it is hard to describe. And I've never had children, and I'll never have children. So I don't know what that's like at all, but I could assume it's like a glorified feeling of when your child performs on stage for the first time, and they're beaming because they feel so great about their performance, right? And it's not about the accomplishment necessarily in that analogy. It's more so about, I don't know, I just feel absolutely incredible because I'm able to take in what they're feeling, but I'm also feeling what I'm feeling at the same time. So I feel like it's like twofold, but times a million. It's hard to describe. Could you even describe what you feel in those moments?
I mean, I think that most importantly, like, I always recognize that, like, they did the work. Like, they own those results. I didn't do it for them. They did it. And like, I think what is most overwhelming is because you're not just looking at an individual success, you're looking at human potential. And I think that, like, you're really watching somebody. I have a friend who's a shaman who's like going through this crazy transformation, and like, she has just let it all out. She's been a single mother, and she's been struggling for a while, and like, she's just like, she's changed her hair, and she's on fire, and her writing's crazy, and she's doing music, and she's like the school of modern shaman, and she is just beautiful right now because she's living her truth and her real self. And I think that's the coolest part, is like coming out of this mask or cocoon or whatever it's called, and really just like beaming out and letting yourself be. And it's almost like a rebirth, like is how I feel. It's like watching the rebirth of somebody.
I absolutely agree with that. And I don't necessarily want to take this negative, but I do want to, it occurred to me that, like, when you feel reborn in that way, because you've done a lot of work, like with I mean, I did everything that I do with my clients. I had 600 resentments when I took inventory. I had 80 things I was fearful of. I had like 100 things that I had harmed people with. And, you know, when I processed all of that with someone, and when I looked at my characteristics and I rearranged them, I decided what characteristics I wanted to lead with and which ones needed to kind of take a back seat, you know.
Yeah.
I entered this world of feeling reborn. I felt pure. I felt organized in like the best possible way. I felt connected. I felt gratitude like every single second of the day. And so I was put on this energy level where I started feeling like I wasn't, even though I was connected to others, I wasn't really like plugged into real life in a way. And I remember around that time I met my husband, and he asked me, hey, can we hang out on Friday night? And I'm like, oh, no, no, no. I have this spiritual thing and this spiritual thing. I'm meeting with this person to talk about spirituality. And, and that's why I truly believe that our intuition has to be a balance of all of those four dimensions, because it's not just cleaning yourself out and then replacing yourself with as spiritual as you can get. At least it's not for me, because I start rocketing to the moon and I'm not tethered to anything. And so it's also a very vulnerable place. And I believe I was taken advantage of by people who were kind of manipulative in my life, that were watching me doing this, transforming, and then at the right time kind of just swooped in, and it's like then it all came crashing down. And so can we talk about the vulnerability that can be created when we're doing this work, and how you support them through those vulnerable times?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely had some personal experience of being in the woo zone and like not being tethered and like getting in trouble. So I've been there too. And I think that when we live in, like, if we're going to let's get into it. I mean, fifth dimensional thinking is kind of where coaches reside. I mean, we're non-judgment, not necessarily good or bad, but there are different sets of rules in the fifth dimension, which is a mental space, and then our physical reality. And it's so important to keep your feet in both. Like, protect your finances, protect your brain and your heart, because I mean, it's unfortunately in this industry, the bar to entry is the lowest it could possibly be, and like the level of excellence is really high. So there's a lot in between, and sometimes we can get caught into people who aren't certified, or maybe have the wrong motivations in coaching, or maybe aren't just considerate of like our spiritual well-being or our mental or health well-being. And so it's really important to be alert, and you kind of have to keep your feet on the ground in order to stay alert in this, because there's so many beautiful things that happen, right, when we're like doing this highly intuitive, higher level stuff, because like all of these crazy interactions happen, and like we're seeing numbers everywhere, and like we're seeing all of our spirit animals, like, and it's like, it's not crazy, it's beautiful, but it's just like you can really get pulled in that direction. So I think like, just again, like bearing witness and listening. My friend who's also a coach, we're in the same coaching program, we've been coaching each other for 3 years, and I know that we've both kind of gone in some out there directions, and we're both like, okay, that's awesome, but like, are we taking care of everything else? Like, let's check in with each other, let's hold each other accountable, let's make sure we're still on path towards our goals, and we're not getting sucked into like negative thinking here, or like overspending, or like over drinking, or like over spiritualing, like, because I love the terminology, and it's called buffering, and it's when you use something in place of feeling your feelings. So like, I think that we can use spirituality just as much as we can use alcohol to not feel. So I think it's really important in witnessing with my clients what they're going through, making sure that they're not in a place of avoidance, and making sure that they are at their ultimate awareness of their wellness. And I think that's the best way to kind of play in the portals,
Yeah, and I like that you talked about like the buffering. I'm working on a book right now, and I'm referring to things of that nature as regulators. So I believe that we all have different moods, and that there are different sort of, there's like a level, there's sort of like a rate, and then there's like a frequency, right? So it's where, like, if music, if you took a keyboard and you were to turn it vertically, and you put the higher keys at the top and the lower keys at the bottom, a sound spectrum operates in a similar way, where it goes, you can think of it vertically from very high all the way down to very low. And I believe that moods work the same way. And so wherever you're falling sort of on that range, it's not just where you fall, it's also how high and low you go. And it's also how fast you're going from high to low. And so there's like three main factors that kind of determine, like, what range you're in on that scale, how high and low, and how fast you're going from high and low. And what makes it complicated more than that is that you have these regulators, and you can look at positive regulators like spirituality or walking in nature or eating well, or appropriate sexual connection, whatever it might be. And then you have sort of on the opposite spectrum things that are detrimental to you and your body and your brain, whether it be alcohol or abusing certain medications, obsession, addiction, things like that. In the middle, so to speak, are and this is something that someone would argue, of course, but if someone needed a medication of some kind where a healthy means couldn't take care of it, you could have a track of, prescribed medication that would be appropriate for the body, mind, spirit, that kind of thing. So you have these three different regulators, and it's like, I find that in life, a lot of times, if your mood isn't where you want it to be, it's just like, oh, well, I'm going to choose this right now, and that's going to be my regulator. And then sometimes we overshoot it one way or another. And it's like, oh, I need another regulator, right? And so it's trying to find this beautiful balance, which, by the way, isn't a straight line across, because if you think of a heart rate monitor, you're dead if it's like going across. We don't want spiking, right? We don't want to like overshoot. So to find this beautiful balance that's customized to us, that feels right to us, it's like, even when you're talking about the goals, well, if you're setting goals that are like up in the stratosphere, that are really not achievable, or they're only achievable by you working 120 million hours a week to try to achieve it, that's another thing that us as coaches, a client could say, I want to get these 20 things done in the next minute. And you're there to navigate that with them. That's part of what we do. And so, when you talk about goals with your clients, how are you helping them set up, frame out, and then achieve reasonable goals that are attainable, but also comfortable for them, with I guess maybe a slight challenge that gets them out of their comfort zone? What's the recipe there? What does that look like?
Well, I think the key analysis point for any kind of goal setting is motivation. Like, why do you want this? Like, understanding your why and understanding what you have decided you will get in having that goal. So I think, like, for example, I wanted to be a chef and I like went to Johnson and Wales to like go like learn how to be a chef. I went to the Miami location, and I did like orientation. And I was like, this is going to cost me $70,000 a year. And if I have children and I'm a chef, like I'm going to have to be gone in the evenings. Or like this school in particular, the kitchens are set up to be on a cruise line.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, okay, well, I want to be this because I'm really artistically expressive. Like, I'm a highly visual person. So like food is my jam. Like, I'm just like, this is beautiful. Like, and we get to eat it and we get to create this beautiful environment with friends. Like, it is like sensory, happy place for me. Like, that is where I like to reside. But it wasn't the answer. And so I think when we look at setting goals, and like everything doesn't have to be the answer, right? Like, everything doesn't have to be the answer. Like, there's no answer. But there are things that are fulfilling. And I recognize that my pattern down the road would not continue to be fulfilling with this goal for myself. So when I look at what my clients say, like, I want to build $100,000 per year business. And you're like, great, why? And they're like, because I have self-worth issues. It's like, no, that's not, no. So, I mean, just recognizing like why we are doing what we are doing, I think is so key. And I think that it is okay to set kind of crazy goals, because like I think that the best part of being alive is blowing your own mind and like creating crazy, like amazing things in your life.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, there needs to be some steps in between. And I think you have to be flexible with these goals. And I think sometimes like the real reason doesn't come out until you're kind of halfway in it. So I just try to give space, give a good analysis of why we're doing this in the first place, what that means to you, what you are making this goal mean. Like, if I wanted to go get a PhD right now, it would simply be based on the fact that I want proof that I'm smart.
Mm.
And like, you can't run on that gas forever, right? Like, that's simply proof of something that I wish or is true. Like, I don't need anything to validate that I'm an intellectual person. So I think that's just the biggest thing is really why. Because if we don't have a real rooted purpose, if we don't have a real good reason for going after these goals, they're going to fizzle out.
Have you ever done the exercise, the why exercise?
I have done that with a marketing coach who is fantastic, and it was great.
I never even knew about it, and someone did it with me a couple weeks ago. It's for viewers, just so you know, it's very simple, but you know, I might say, you know, I want to write a book, and Alissa would say, why? And I'd say, well, because I want to translate the things that I've gathered that I think would be helpful for others to read and hear and take on in their lives. And Alyssa would say, why? Right? And so it
Right.
would just keep going on. And some people do it 3 times and feel that, you know, the heart of it is after the third. I had someone do it for what felt like 5, 6, or 7 times. But it's, you know, and oftentimes where you arrive, it's something usually very simple, but it matters a lot. And
Yeah.
so I thought that exercise was, I mean, maybe everybody knows about it. I'm like late to the party, but I thought that was a really cool exercise.
No, it is really cool. And I think it's really cool to like get into the deep vast of yourself and like what you are trying to do with your life and like what your real motivations are. And I think that comes out, like, I also want to write a book. And like, my reason for writing a book is because I want to write a book. Like, I've always wanted to be a writer as a kid, and like, that's a good enough reason for me. And I think that like creative expression is a good enough reason. And that's such an easy reason. And yet it's everything, you know. It's just like the expressive self, like the self, like, it's so hard to allow people to do that too, because, or for people to allow themselves, I guess, to do it too, because it's like, well, it's not going to be as good as their book, and it's not going to be as good as this, and like everybody's already doing it. And it's like, it doesn't matter. You let it out.
Yeah.
You let it
What I love about it, and this is why I do
out.
the show, is that everybody has a story. And no one's story is the exact same story as anybody else's, even if you can relate to it. And that's why I love doing Transforming Today show, because we get to hear people's stories. And when you write a book, you usually thread parts of your life and parts of who you are through that book somehow, no matter what the subject matter is. And um, you know, I think the other part of this is that there may be parts of us, let's say we're still talking about the book, um, that I know for me, I'm like wrestling, well, what do I put in? What do I keep out? You know, what needs to be shared and what doesn't? What makes up my character? Like, how am I going to describe my character in this book? Like, it's almost like you have to be writing from inside. Um, and there are many people who write from inside and it gets published. But when there are things that, you know, when there are things that don't necessarily need to be said, but they're still connected to who you are, you know, it's like, again, that observer kind of comes in and it's like, well, do I put a filter on this, or how much of a filter do I put on? And, you know, am I going to be sort of putting a wrinkle in the story if I'm not sharing this or that? Like, so it's really interesting. And it's just, that's, you know, it's kind of an analogy for what we do in life too, right? As we're kind of like I don't know if the philosophy is, the more that we work on ourselves and the more that we become comfortable with who we are, and are able to share who we are with the world, like, does that make us free? Does that work? Like, is that when we feel really free or like completely free? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I love, so Brene Brown recently said like the best measure of courage is vulnerability and like letting your truth out. And I think there is a time and place for truth, because it's not cool to say I'm just speaking my truth and say terrible things to people.
Right.
Like, why? Like, that doesn't really achieve anything. But I think when we're talking about like shameful experiences, things that we kind of keep in, letting those things out and sharing your humanity, that you've been through some sucky stuff, like that's where unity comes from. That's where like humanity evolves, because we're not hiding. Like, I always thought it was so funny. So I was an anthropology major, and they always talked about how in Asia people like really work to save face in conversations. Like, they're not like American and loud and like just selling everything. But I think Americans do it too. I think they do it a lot. And the best example is social media, is because like you have this existential self online and you're only sharing what you want to share. So there's a lot of saving face there. And I think that's where a lot of the divisiveness comes from, is because we're all keeping secrets here. And there isn't room for us to really allow those like shattered, ugly parts to come out and be like, oh, I have those shattered, ugly parts too, you know? Like, so I think just being real with yourself, and then kind of like going back and editing, because like, I mean, there's things that we need to still heal. There's things that we need to like still spend time with. But sometimes, and I think most times, that healing really comes from being honest and being truthful and sharing painful stories.
Yeah, and I think that it doesn't have to necessarily be shared all in the same place too,
Right.
right? So there's going to be friends or advisors or whatever it is, that it's going to be more appropriate to share certain things versus sharing a lot with the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay. You know, I think like I've always had that philosophy, like even my husband isn't going to fulfill everything that I need in life. And I think that's a good thing. That's why I need family. That's why I need friends. That's why I need, you know, other coaches to talk to and work with. And I think the same goes for sharing who we are too, because some things may not be appropriate. Some things may be too personal, because, you know, not that we have to protect ourselves necessarily, but it's a way of valuing who we are, our experiences, and we get to choose what we get to share. Um, so I don't know why we went down that path really, but it was meant to come out for some reason.
Coming
But
out. But only
so
parts of it.
look at them, like we've turned this into a coaching session. So.
No, this conversation is amazing. But I think what you said is really true. And I think, and Oprah said it too, because someone was like, Oprah, why don't you go yell at Donald Trump? And she's like, because I only speak where I'm heard.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't make sense to share really vulnerable, precious parts of ourselves with people who are going to use it and turn around and hurt us with it. Like, that's crazy. Like, don't do that. That's not a good choice. Like, share where healing can happen. Share where you're going to be heard. Share where your words are going to be valued. Like, I totally 100% agree with you.
I love how you just put that. And I know that that's the safe place that you create for your clients. And so if people are watching right now, and I know tons of people are inspired by your words today, and if they want to take the step to reach out to you and work with you, what does that look like and how do they get a hold of you?
So I have a website, and it's Vivant, like in a bon vivant, because I'm obsessed. Vivantcoaching.com. There's a dash in between Vivant and coaching. So vivant-coaching.com. And then I'm also on Facebook at Alissa Taglione. You could just Google that and my name should come up, and my Facebook page should be there also. And I have a podcast called The Bloom Method, which hopefully you'll come on soon and we can chit chat and continue our high level conversations over there. And that's kind of been a brand new adventure that's really cool. I've had some interesting people on, and I've been talking about the program and the process. And yeah, like I would love to connect to anybody. Like, I just think the best part about this work is connecting person to person. It's a rare occurrence these days. So, I mean, it's always an absolute honor. So yeah, thank you.
You are so welcome. And Alissa, it's been a pleasure having you on today. Thank you so much for being here. And I want to thank our viewers. I hope you love today, viewers, because this was like I feel cleansed just from after having some layers have lifted off. I'll have to dust later and vacuum.
Sage the house.
Come off. But I hope you guys felt the same way, and I love that you join us here, and I love that you're just willing to learn and grow and hear about coaching and how transformational it can be. So if you don't have a coach, consider getting one. Reach out to me, reach out to Alissa. We're happy to talk to you about what that process looks like. We did a little bit of that today. But we're just glad that you're here with us and that you shared this time with us. So I want to thank you again, viewers, and Alissa, thank you again.
Yay!
Bye.
Don't you love how people can only see part of your office?
Yeah, I mean, I try to just like, wow,
right. Like, oh, no.
so different.
Yeah.
Where are you? On you. Okay, there you go. Okay, I'm good.
All right, perfect.
I like whenever I'm like interviewing someone, like every once in a while I'll look over at myself just for a second and like one strand is out like this.
Right.
How did I not catch that? Yay!
I want to high five you through the screen. Like, I was just like, I just want to high five her.
Do it. Purpose is sometimes multifaceted and it's always moving. So it's like once you find it, you kind of have to like latch on to it. Harry Potter, you know? Yeah. And it's just like you're going around and around and you're like, this is fun.